Hello pilots, and welcome to another Eve Echoes video. Today we're going to be doing a Deadspace encounter. These are the portals that you can find through exploration, specifically using the blue wide scanners. You find the location, bookmark it, and then invite your corp mates to a fleet and run a little bit harder content for some better rewards. And I'm going to be showcasing my Moa II Guardian, which is actually one of my favorite ships in all of Eve Echoes. And here's the fit. Alright, let's load this thing up. And yep, you can see I went with the medium railguns in the high slots there. You can actually go with medium missiles if you prefer. I have about 100,000 extended HP. I'm a shield tank, and I mean that's just massive for a cruiser. That's with all modules activated, by the way. You see here I use the blue C-type railguns. I have a small shield field in the mid slot, and then a web just in case any small ships get close. I can slow them down for my team. We've got a reactive in the low slots, and then two C-type adaptives, a C-type medium shield booster, and a C-type medium battery. Also went with a micro warp drive, C-type micro warp drive. Let's check out the rigs here. We have a core defense field just for some extra overall shield, and then we have the anti-thermal and I believe it's anti-EM. Yep, those are the two that I usually like to run on the defensive shield tank ships. We have a semiconductor memory core, a capacitor control circuit, and an auxiliary power grid, and that's just to get us enough power grid so that we can run all of our C-type modules. Alright, so just a couple of things I wanted to highlight here as we get ready to run our encounter is you definitely want to use a small shield field in the mid slot. You don't want to use a medium or a large. I mean, you can, but whenever something enters into your shield field, they're going to gain the resistances that's giving your ship and your allies as well. So using a smaller shield, making sure everybody stays close, approach 1 to 3 kilometers to your ship, to the Guardian, and stay inside that bubble. We like to call it a bubble here. Okay, you can also, again I said during the fittings, but you can use medium missiles, which are probably a little bit better because they don't take capacitor to fire, and you're not going to be dishing out a whole lot of DPS using a Guardian ship anyway. I just happen to go with the medium rifles because I had them, and I have better skills in rifles than I do missiles. Okay, if you find your resists are doing pretty well, you can actually drop one of the adaptive shields and put in another battery. If you seem to be having some capacitor issues, you can go with a large battery and a medium shield if you want, if you can fit it on the power grid. Or you can go with a target painter instead of the web, and that's just to kind of light things up at a distance for your teammates, depending on what kind of group that you're running and what kind of composition you ended up with. And then lastly, I know some people like to use the afterburner instead of the micro warp drive, and that is because the micro warp drive actually reduces your total capacitor by about 25%. So some people don't want to make that sacrifice. They want to have as much capacitor as possible, especially running with a medium battery. But since we're going to be going into a dead space, and you're going to be having to travel long distances in between portals, I like to run with a micro warp drive just so I can keep up with some of the other faster cruisers in the group. Alright, quick shout out to some of the corp mates that joined me on this encounter. We have Crash Override using his Gila. Okay. Looks like Jesney was going to be driving a Caracal Navy issue. Zay was in a Slasher frigate, and Radiant Morgana actually brought a Moa II Guardian as well, even though we didn't need a second Guardian. Well, we were struggling to find cruiser and below size ships to run this encounter. So let's fast forward and get this started. Okay, so we are inside the dead space at this point, and you can see we have some ships out there at about 50 kilometers away. We want to make sure that the Guardian ship goes in first, sets up the defenses, sets up the bubble, and everybody kind of follows in and approaches nice and close. The hope is that the faster moving rats that are going to be coming at you can be taken out by some distance shooting before they can get on top of you, before they can get underneath your shield. Then you start picking off some of the heavier targets, maybe some elites that spawn, and just basically single targeting, focus firing on one ship at a time and kind of dwindling their numbers so they don't get overwhelmed. And as a Guardian ship, you don't really have to do any firing. I think I used my weapons a little bit, especially for things that got into my range, just to kind of help so that we didn't get overwhelmed. But for the most part, you can just focus on your shield, focus on your capacitor, make sure that shield field is running at all times, and make sure that nothing gets in too close. If it does, especially as the fleet commander, you want to make sure you fleet command single target that thing, get it down quick. Web it if it gets underneath your shield and move away. Focus on making sure everybody stays in a group, stays close, and if anybody drifts outside of that bubble, they can quickly be targeted and taken down, especially by these more difficult NPCs. So let's go ahead and focus down some of these smaller ships, the destroyers, the frigates, take care of those quickly. You can see I can actually contribute some DPS here to these ships, so it's not a total loss. I would have preferred probably to be going missiles with this just so that it didn't use any capacitor while I'm firing, but it seems like the Moa II Guardian is just such a beefy tank at that cruiser ship size that it's not going to matter much, especially with a capacitor battery in that low slot. Another thing I wanted to make mention of specifically is to make sure that all of your group mates have the auto approach or auto orbit feature that's in settings turned off, because when they auto select a target, or if you fleet command to specifically burn down a target, they're going to start to drift. They're going to start to auto orbit that target, and you want them to stay inside your bubble. So that's one of the early things that we had some issues with. Some of the newer players drifting outside of the bubble and just not even realizing it. They were 10 kilometers out, and by that time, you know, half health in the hull and just too late to save them. So make sure you turn that feature off, especially if you're going to be grouping, especially if you're going to be inside a Guardian's bubble. All right, so we got 2 ships left here, and end of wave, we're going to make sure we want to be a good distance away from the spawn point, closer to the portal, make sure everybody's close inside the bubble, and just finish these things off, burn them down one at a time, and prepare for the next wave. You always want to be ready to go. Don't drift off, don't separate, and don't start looting before the next waves come in, because if you're outside that bubble, like I keep stating, and I want to make sure I stress that, I can't stress that enough, you could be out for 3 seconds and just get blown to pieces because you don't have the same resistances that this Moa II Guardian is running. Alright, so same thing with the second wave here. We're going to be selecting the ships smallest to biggest and taking them down one at a time just to burn out and make sure we don't get overwhelmed with the sheer numbers. I think a lot of this you'll notice is very similar to the storyline encounters if you run in a fleet. Very similar, you know, you grab a Guardian, you grab a Shield Guardian, and everybody stays close and takes things down one at a time. It's a very similar instance in way you run it. However, when you start to get towards the end of the waves, you'll see we run into some elite NPCs, and those are going to be a little bit more difficult to take down than some of these regular tier 6 rats. Alright, so I didn't get a good shot, I skipped ahead a little bit, but when you're inside a Deadspace, there's going to be multiple rooms or multiple portals that you're going to want to go through. The first room is always going to be the easiest. It pretty much gives you a good way to practice and set up your group strategies, make sure everybody's on the same page. After you go ahead and loot the first room, all gather up, make your way over to the next portal and start, and it's going to be the same process. You want the Guardian to go in first, start taking the fires, and then everybody will come in afterwards and make sure they stick up inside that bubble. A little bit of a miscalculation on my part. I warped in and instantly was jumped upon by a couple of rats here. Got way too close. I went ahead and webbed the first one that got on top of me and just tried to approach away from it, keep my distance as much as possible so that when my partners came in that the ship would be outside of the bubble and be easily dealt with. And it's exactly what happened. As you can see, as soon as they enter in, target, burst down, gone. Go ahead and switch the web over to the destroyer here, take him down. Perfect. So feeling a lot better now. We have the ships away from the portal and we have a good distance between the main group coming at us. We'll just slowly start selecting everything one at a time, the ones that are closest, and dealing with that before they can get to us. You want to keep that angular velocity as good as possible so that ships aren't coming at you from an angle. You want them coming at you straight on, and that'll help with rifle damage specifically. And I always try to do that because I'm much more of a rifle pilot than I am a missile or cannon or laser, but I always make sure that I keep that straight line from my opponents at a distance. Some of the things that I'm watching out for as I'm running this fleet command position, and I'm running the Guardian specifically, is I'm looking on the right hand side there where it says ship, and I'm making sure that my entire group is within 7 kilometers, because 7 kilometers, I think it's 7.5 is the range or the radius of the bubble, and as long as they're inside 7.5 kilometers, then they will be getting the same resistances as your Moa II Guardian, and you're going to be basically taking all the damage for them. They aren't going to need a shield booster, a shield extender, nothing. no heals. They can save their low slots for some more DPS if they want, and as long as they stay inside that bubble, you should be good. I'm also looking for any enemy ships, making sure nothing gets within about 20 kilometers. The range on my medium rifles are about 20 with some fall off, but I make sure that no NPCs are getting close, my group mates are staying close, and that everything is kind of going nice and smooth, one target at a time, whittle them down. After that, we're just going to be making sure we're watching the capacitor, running our battery. If anything gets around 60%, watching our shield. If your shield drops, I will say this as a side note, if your shield drops, your shield field module will turn off and all your resistances will be gone for your entire group. That's usually when you get a full wipe. So you want to make sure that shield is topped up, and if it gets to around, I don't know, 50% and you're getting a little overwhelmed, call for a retreat. Don't be afraid to go back through that portal, and don't lose your entire fleet because you were overconfident. Because I think if anybody's watched my last video about the tier 10 Deadspace with my Moa II Guardian, you'll know I was way too confident and I dropped way too fast, and it caused the whole group wipe. So don't be arrogant, you know. Watch your shield, watch your capacitor, watch the distance of your group mates, call out targets if you can, and just take your time and try not to lose any ships on the way. And you'll see a great example of overconfidence right here as we're finishing off the last ship. I don't know if I thought it was the last wave or if I was just super enjoying shooting my rifled railguns at the targets, but I drifted way too far away from looks like Jessney, and as the next wave spawns, he is 15 kilometers away from me. Everybody else is close, so I don't know if he forgot to hit the approach consistently or not, but you can tell just being outside of the bubble for a few seconds. You'll see on the left side there in the fleet window, his health just starts dropping because he's getting targeted by all those enemies outside of my bubble. I don't know if they specifically target him because he is outside, but I try my best to make my way over to him and get him back inside so that we can protect everybody. But that was definitely a mistake on my part, getting overconfident and drifting away from my own team when I'm the one yelling for everybody to stay close. I mean, if you ever see me run that micro warp drive during a fight, that's the exact wrong thing to do. Not only is it going to increase your signature radius, it's going to make you drift away from people who you've told not to use their speed modules or may not even have them equipped. So the only time I should be ever using that micro warp drive is to get away from things if we have one or two targets left, or to transverse between one portal to the next to start the next wave. Okay, so you can see how quickly this is going to go with a frigate here as Zay drifts just outside. I think it was around 8 kilometers and just instantly goes down. Probably the Shadow Vigilant, I think it was, is like an elite NPC, took him down in 1 or 2 hits, but just maybe 2 or 3 seconds outside of my bubble and just pop instantly. Frigate's definitely not meant for this kind of content. You can do it in a frigate, but you're gonna have to be super fast, and then you're also running against other super fast NPCs, so it's just much safer to stay inside that shield field, use distant weapons, and if you're gonna use a frigate, if you're gonna bring something small like that, still stay inside the shield and then just target anything that happens to get within range. Because it definitely did not take much, and there was no way that I was going to be able to react to that in time to get my ship shield back over the top of him. So sorry about that, Zay. Next time we'll be more prepared and we'll let you know. Alright, so we're going to run the rest of this encounter as a 4-man here. We got Radiant, Crash, myself, and it looks like Jessney. And we're all in cruiser-sized ships, so it should be a little bit easier, pretty straightforward still. Stay inside the bubble. I don't think we'll lose too much DPS. And we'll just take these things down one at a time. And I prefer to save the elite ships for the last, just because not only do they take longer to take down, you'll see in a little bit how hard they are to hit, but you can burn down the smaller ships so fast that you end up with larger numbers than the enemy, and that's always the best way to run these encounters. Always have more than they do whenever possible. Okay, again, myself not heeding to my own advice here. We're down to 3 ships, one of them's elite, and what we should have done is just targeted the weaker rats first, take them out. I believe, yeah, Crash calls for Vigilant right here. We should just stay on the smaller targets, but I see some damage being applied to the Vigilant, and I think, hey, I'm an offensive ship for some reason, and go ahead and activate my, my turrets on the Vigilant instead of the target that I was already fighting on. Yeah, you'll see right there. Gonna switch, gonna turn on that micro warp drive, trying to get in close and web that fast ship. I don't know what I was doing, honestly. Totally not what you want to do as a Guardian pilot. Your job is not to web. Your job is not to micro warp drive in close and slow targets down or even do damage. Your job is to sit still, keep that shield field, and you'll see all my teammates drifting away from me. Technically, I'm drifting away from them, exposing them to damage. Totally. What a rookie move. I'm very disappointed in myself, but this is a great example of what not to do as a Guardian pilot. Don't go in for the kill. Don't go in and try and web things down for your team. It's not your job. Let them focus on that. Let them use their mid slots and their DPS and do their job. Okay, so I'll go ahead and let this roll on this last target in this wave, and you'll see how difficult it was for us to take down this fast ship. I'm not sure if he was using a micro warp drive or an afterburner, but eventually we catch up to him. We use some kind of a slingshot method to drag him into the group and pin him down, so to speak. And that's the main challenge with these dead spaces, and one of the reasons why you need a group, because even if you can't catch up to the ship, if you can get him to focus on you and kind of slingshot him back towards your group, they can be at a good distance away from you enough to where their webs can reach even when yours can't. And that's basic teamwork. So that's basically what we ended up doing with this ship. It was really difficult to pin him down, but after this drag technique, I think we all kind of jumped on it and slowed him down and made sure we grouped up in time for the next wave. Alright, we got just in range there, stick our web on him, and that's one of the reasons why we carry a web in that mid slot, just so we can be a little bit more helpful. And once we get 1, 2, maybe even 3 webs on this thing, I think it's pretty much going to be over for him. So just prepare, approach, have your group approach you again, and stick together because there's another wave coming. And finally, look at that bounty tick. That's 1.3 million just for that ship alone. Split 4 ways. Very impressive bounty tick on that ship. That you can tell how hard it was. So we go into the next wave here, and I immediately recognize that Shadow Daredevil, and we want to take that thing out. You can see how fast it's coming at us, but it's coming at a straight line. So we want to take that out as fast as possible. I go ahead and lock on and fleet command, let everybody know that we want to take this thing down as it gets within range, and we do not want it to get underneath the shields, because we thought a Vigilant was difficult. If a Daredevil gets underneath you and starts orbiting you with a micro warp drive, it's going to be really difficult to take that thing down. So luckily we were able to get it coming at a straight line. It got a little bit too close, got webbed by me, I believe webbed by another party member as well, and we were able to start giving it some good hits and take it down early. There's usually 2 or 3 elite faction ships, and that's the most difficult part about all of these dead spaces. Also, where you get a majority of the loot. But we'll talk about loot boxes after this, after we finish the waves. Our main priority here is taking down all the ships and making sure we don't die, making sure we don't lose anybody else. Yeah, so just as I was worried about, you can see here we have 2 Shadow Vigilance now on top of that Daredevil. So good thing we took out that Daredevil early, because these 2 elite ships are going to be elite faction ships. Let's keep that in mind. They're going to be very difficult to take down if we don't get webs on them early and all focus fire. Alright, so with a little bit of struggles fighting these elite faction ships, I go ahead and make the call to kind of thin the herd. Let's take out the small stuff first. Let's not get overwhelmed and let those ships get free shots on us while we're missing the speedy vigilance. Let's kind of dwindle their numbers, and then we can come back and fight those things at the end when we have a little bit better manageable tank here. I can see my capacitors getting a low, about 50% now. My shield's dropping. I'd never like that. Never comfortable when the shield is dropping. So we go ahead and focus fire on some of these easier to kill ships and kind of thin it out until we can get to the last 2 faction ships. Okay, and looking back at this, I can't really tell how Justny got 20 plus kilometers away from me. I don't know if he accidentally auto-orbited one of the targets, or I wasn't calling targets for a period of time, but he's definitely outside my bubble, and he's not going to last long with a cruiser, especially with the rest of the amount of ships that we had left on this. Once his resistances drop from being outside my bubble, he's going to go down real quick. And there he goes. Sorry about that, Justny. I watched the video back. I tried to see if that was my mistake or if there was some kind of auto-orbiting thing, but for whatever reason, it looks like we're going to be 3-manning the rest of this Deadspace encounter from here on out. Alright, so finally at the last elite faction ship, we got him down about half hull and feeling pretty good. We're gonna go ahead and finish him off and then claim our loot. Now when you do a Deadspace, not only do you get the elite green items from the ships that you kill, you get some general gray items as well, but there's loot boxes inside of the encounter, and those are the most valuable things. Those are going to be things that you would get like Serpentis keys or blue items. The C-type are going to be really valuable, and the things that you're kind of hoping to get the most of when you're running these instances. So we go ahead and declare crash our designated looter, pick everything up, and I believe we walked away with about 276 million ISK worth of loot. We split that 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 ways, yeah, so it was a good run overall. I apologize for the losses. We compensated Zay, compensated Justny for his loss. I apologize for not being able to be involved in the fight longer, but definitely want to make sure that I mention that those were probably my fault, especially the Zay one was my fault for not staying close and sticking to my role. Alright, so we'll go ahead and wrap it up. This has been an example of a Moa II Guardian. Played not exceptionally well, but I'm also not super high skilled in it, so you don't need a ton of skill investment. This is just a really beefy cruiser ship that you can help your your group mates out with. As long as they stay inside that shield, and as long as you're not trying to be the hero, you can definitely walk away with some Deadspace loot from these encounters. So if you have any questions, if you have any comments, feel free to leave them in the comment section, and look forward to seeing you again. Thanks.